Hey, it's July 17th, so what better time to film a June wrap-up? If you're interested in just the wrap-up, you can jump ahead to the timestamps that are in the description. Otherwise, I'd love to update you on how things are going in life. So, I'm obviously a few weeks late. I took June basically to focus on my health. That was really important. I have a lot of post-viral symptoms from how sick I was over the winter. If you follow my channel, you're aware that I was sick for several months, and after that, I very suddenly lost my cat. So it was like sick, 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 and then very, very stressed. So all of that together really compounded, and I've just not been feeling great this past little while. But books have helped a lot, and also some of you have been so, so kind and said some amazing things to me on social media. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Really, really appreciate your kindness and your patience. You are wonderful. Let's dive into some books. So I don't have any physical books with me today. I did read two of them physically, but got them both from the library, and I've returned them since because I have been trying really hard to go to the library. You're going to see that in a vlog. Really exciting. I absolutely love the library. I didn't realize that we have both a city library and a provincial library, and because of that, there's like very different selections in the two of them. Again, because I live in Quebec, most of the books that we have at the city and provincial libraries are in French, but I found some really, really great English language books. And I also read a French language book for the first time in possibly a decade. I went to school in French all the way up to university, and since university, I don't think that I've read any any books in French. Well, back when I was a teenager, I would do it all the time, so it was nice to revisit. Let me tell you about what I read. Okay. First book that I read in June, that I finished in June, was the audiobook for Stolen Focus by Johann. Oh my gosh. This was really, really good. This was really good. I mean, I have been following the general sort of conversation around social media and attention span and just how much social media is messing with us and how we're in this sort of unprecedented, unpredictable time. Another book that like I read this year that reminded me a lot of this was The Chaos Machine, which was again about social media. So that was really the perspective I went into Johann Hari's books with. I was like, okay, social media has stolen our focus because we're rats in a maze being told to press the lever, we'll get likes, that's how this works. And yes, he touches on persuasive technologies, but he touches also a lot on what focus is and why it's important, and what sort of environmental factors can disrupt focus. I found this very interesting. He talked about pollution, he talked about nutritional factors, he talked about media saturation, and I think one of my favorite takeaways from this book was actually how much he talked about the state of flow. The number one change I've made in my life since reading this book is to identify the activities that put me in a state of flow and to think of that as my true rest. Because I have really noticed in myself that when I'm just sort of potatoing on the couch and watching TV, that's not restful. I don't feel restored after that. I feel restored after doing something that puts me in a state of flow. What I really liked is in the book, one of the examples of flow was rock climbing, and talking about how the point of rock climbing isn't to finish the climb, like yes, but the act of climbing is the point. And I've been rock climbing recreationally for about 6 months now. It's been really amazing for me, especially with how difficult this year has been. So I was like, yes, I feel seen. And what's really funny is my English major partner compares rock climbing to poetry. He's a poet, and that's exactly the comparison that was made in Stolen Focus. Was like, this is how rock climbing is like poetry, which I thought was really funny because that's relevant to my life. Anyway, so a state of flow. Anyway, just kind of rambling about this book, but really it provoked a lot of thought. It provoked a lot of discussion in my household, and it has changed how I see my own relationship with social media, how I see our culture's relationship with social media, and also how I use my time. Already a few years ago when the pandemic hit, I very consciously made a decision to prioritize off-screen time, and to notice when I'm prone to sort of getting stuck in a screen spiral and limiting those those things, and now I'm trying even more to make my off-screen time as fulfilling as possible. Yeah, I would really recommend this if you are looking to get inspired. I find it very inspiring. I found it very insightful too. I found it very non-judgmental. I found it very relatable and very approachable. Again, it's being written from a kind of a specific perspective that I know a lot of people disagree about. And some of the controversies I saw in the like 1-star reviews, because I love reading 1-star reviews, are the pathologization of ADHD in the book, which I think they're not fully warranted criticisms. I understand where they're coming from, but I would say that the author is actually quite conservative in terms of how he presents the different perspectives on the rise of ADHD in the general population. I think it's one of those things that it's too soon to tell, and he really just sort of talks to various people who are involved in the issue and reports back what they tell him. So he's not kind of taking a side, he's more giving us a sense of what is the field. And when it comes to contentious issues, I think it's always more helpful to have a sense of what are people currently thinking, what are the experts currently thinking, and then just so that whether we want to agree or refute, we know where we're agreeing with or refuting. And I think he presents things clearly and accurately. I think he presents other perspectives clearly and accurately, if that makes sense. That said, if you have another perspective, I would love to hear it. So all that said, I did give this book 5 stars. I found it super thought-provoking. I found it very interesting. Again, while I do not agree with everything the author says, and this happens very often in nonfiction, I found this book compelling enough and interesting enough and fresh enough to leave me thinking about it for weeks and months after. Like, I think I need to get myself a copy of this and kind of go through some of the more relevant chapters again. Membrane, or Membrane, the book that I read in French. So the first book that I read in French in basically a decade, and it was so good. It was so good. So this was a Taiwanese sci-fi book from the 90s that I don't know how it came on my radar. I don't remember. I have no memory of this book appearing in my life, but at one point it did. And the premise of the book is that we now live, human beings, 100 years into the future, we have scorched the earth, and we now live in domes under the ocean, as one does. And then our main character is an esthetician, like a beautician, under the ocean, gives people skin treatments to make them beautiful. And as we find out more about the society, we also find out more about her. All is not what it seems. It goes into like disturbing corners of the world. It goes into post-humanism, and there's androids in this book, and there's government spyware, and there's concepts around like organ donation and what constitutes a person. Like, if you like the themes that Kazuo Ishiguro explored in Never Let Me Go and in Clara and the Sun, please read Membrane. Like, Kazuo Ishiguro, eat your heart out. This was amazing and gives big Ishiguro vibes, Ishiguro sci-fi vibes specifically. And it's just like, yeah, it was just such a like bizarre read. I couldn't put it down. And it has these really funny satirical moments. So there's a company that rivals Microsoft, and it's called Macro Hard. I saw an English review that I think in English it's translated as Mega Hard. In French it's Macro Hard, which I think is way funnier. Microsoft Macro Hard. That is exactly my brand of humor, because I too would like to wreck Microsoft forever, because that's what I do in my day job is Microsoft. I don't work for Microsoft, I work with Microsoft products. As one does. This is not a product placement, this is a complaint. This is a cry for help, actually. Anyway, I really recommend this book if you can get your hands on it. It's pretty much impossible to get your hands on, but it is absolutely worth it if you love sci-fi. If you love sci-fi that explores social issues, obviously some post-apocalyptic stuff, some mystery, if you like not knowing what's going on until sort of like, and just getting like breadcrumbs, this is absolutely, absolutely for you. Okay, we've reached a disappointment. Let's talk about the good. The cover. Look at the cover. Look at the cover of Motherthing. This is freaking amazing. This is the 80s movie that I want to see. I want to see this movie. It looks amazing. We have a woman screaming. We have a mysterious ring. We have a piece of meat on a plate. What species is the meat? We don't know. Yes, we do. I just spoiled it effectively because this is a book I rated 1 star because it just went for shock value. No plot, just shock value, as they say. I don't know if it's my reading choices or if this is just what current modern horror trends are like, but there has been a lot of cannibalism in what I've read recently. So this really felt like someone was like, Mom said it's my turn to use the cannibalism as a plot device. And here we got the cannibalism. And that is a spoiler. That is a spoiler. I'm sorry, but that's the point of the book. And I literally just saved you a couple of hours of your life because this book is straight up not very good. If that stops you from reading, I have saved you. There are better versions of what this book is trying to achieve. I was really, really hoping for something better. So, okay, let me tell you why I thought this book would be good. The premise is that we're following our main character, Abigail, Abby, whatever, and her mother-in-law dies. Her mother-in-law's been living with Abby and her husband. Abby's mother-in-law dies and then haunts them in the home, and Abby in the meantime also works as a daytime care worker, like in a retirement home. And we basically see the tension between her caring for her husband, who's grieving the death of his mother, and then going and dealing with elderly people whose children don't visit them. And there's this like tension of parent to child, especially mother to child kind of stuff. So we thought all of that would be good. And I watched Yellow Jackets recently, so now I'm just picturing Abigail as Misty, because that's sort of the personality we have going on. Abigail is like a less interesting Misty, if you've seen Yellow Jackets. The part that really annoyed me, though, is that the way Abigail's mother died is she dies by suicide. And Abigail takes that personally. Like, she cleans the blood. Not to be too graphic, but she does, the opening scene is of her cleaning the blood and her being, like, upset with the mom for, like, dirtying the basement with her blood while she ended her life. Which gives you exactly the sense of the kind of person that Abigail is, and she really has this very, very one-dimensional view of her mother-in-law. Like, she really polarizes people. And it's a little bit insufferable. The novel really dragged on and on. I just want to complain about this book so much. I was really disappointed. It was skimming it so I could finish it, but I wanted to DNF it kind of book. I don't particularly recommend it. Go read Earthlings instead. Go watch Yellow Jackets instead. Very rarely will I say go watch a TV show instead, but go watch Yellow Jackets instead, especially the first season. Same energy, more entertaining. Yeah, Motherthing was a bust for me. Sorry to say. If you liked it, please tell me why, because it did not work. It did not work for me. And then we get to Us Against You. Okay, so Beartown is going to be in the top books that I read this year, obviously. So the sequel, Us Against You, I liked it. I liked it less than Beartown. I still really liked it. It is difficult for me to talk about it right now because I just finished book 3, The Winners, like a few days ago. And those two books really kind of blend together. But Us Against You is a very direct sequel to Beartown. We follow a very similar cast of characters. There are some new ones. We do get some extra focus on characters who were just side characters before. And there are developments. Like, we basically just get to witness what was the aftermath. What's really built up in Us Against You is the rivalry between the two villages, so between Beartown and their neighboring Hed. which I know is spelled head, but the audiobook narrator always pronounces it Hed. If someone Swedish could clarify this for me, that would be great. So the rivalry between Beartown and Hed and their ice hockey teams, and also the journey of our young, all our young characters who are teenagers going onto adulthood. The book's about interpersonal conflict. It says it's about interpersonal conflict. Stuff happens. Stuff happens that honestly I don't want to describe because I'm terrified of giving you spoilers, especially spoilers for the third book. All that said, this book was good, and I did rate it highly. Now that I've read the winners, I kind of want to go back and lower my rating a little bit because a couple of the things that started to grate on me in Us Against You were also present in the winners. With that said, if you absolutely loved Beartown, you might not like the sequel. Definitely read Beartown. It's a masterpiece. You might have mixed feelings about the sequel because, again, it's more Backman. Backman loves to talk like a Hallmark card, but it kind of works. But at the same time, platitudes. So many platitudes. And it's really the same sort of vibe, the same narration. It's what you expect. Let's put it that way. Us Against You didn't surprise me in any way. Beartown surprised me. Us Against You didn't surprise me, but it was still solid. So I do recommend it, but I'd say that it's not necessary. We're gonna stick it there. I actually really like my Goodreads review for this. I think I should sub that in here instead because it is so much more optimistic. Because what does it say about me? That I enjoy reading about people being sad. I enjoy watching multiple generations interact in innocuous ways, but know that they're shaped by unspeakable trauma. I enjoy reading about loneliness, grief, missed opportunities, loss, and all the painful, complicated things that come with it. Enjoy may not be the right word for that. In the sequel, we revisit familiar characters and we meet some old ones. Few things happen, but what does happen matters a great deal. Backman continues to tease us. First, he reveals the plot. Someone is going to die. And then he goes over it and over it again like a sculptor, refining the details. And the reader, we get to speculate about the details until they're slammed in our face. And we find out what actually happened. So the things that would normally annoy me in a lot of books, especially like the sap, somehow just work with Backman, like the sap, the sentimentality, the repetitiveness, the platitudes. But I also couldn't stop reading it, and I couldn't stop feeling big emotions while I was reading it. So in my review, I did recommend it to anyone who wants to feel big emotions, especially about a sport that they may or may not care about, are prepared to drown in characters' ruminations of their trauma. That's always fun, right? And who make, not great decisions as a result of that. And if your heart dial is set to sappy rather than skeptical. And see, now that I'm filming, the problem is that my heart dial is set to skeptical because I think the winners pushed it into skeptical. But when I finished Us Against You, we were still in sappy zone. So if your heart is set to sappy, read this. Skeptical, maybe not. Maybe not. Reading this was like being trapped in some kind of nightmare directed by David Lynch. Like, reading this felt like having a nightmare. That book is The Blind Owl. I went into this book knowing basically nothing about it, other than the fact that the author died by suicide about 10 years after reading the book. So I was like, okay, we're gonna have some bleakness. I was expecting bleak. I also knew it was an Iranian classic, so I expected something Iranian, a setting perhaps, but I didn't really have too many preconceived notions of that. Otherwise, I had no idea what was going to happen, and I really recommend reading the book that way. Do not read anything about this. It is a short book, and it is weird. So just, if you're curious about the book, don't read any summaries, don't read any reviews. They're not going to help you anyway. The summaries won't help. This is a dream. This book is a dream, but a literal nightmare. I don't want to spoil it for you. I don't want to spoil it at all. I'm looking at my Goodreads review and I have a couple of like semi-spoilers in terms of thoughts. So I'm gonna elaborate on some of the ones that are not spoilery, and if you've read the book, you can go to my Goodreads and see what else I had to say. There's so much layering and repetition in this book that I found absolutely fascinating. So have you ever had a dream where like you walk into a room and like a particular person's there, and then you're like, oh no, so you leave that room and go into another one and that same person's there again, or like the same object keeps reappearing, like that kind of thing? This happens in the book a lot, and it's unclear. You're like, wait, is that the same person? Is that just someone super similar? Is that actually me? Like, you don't know what's going on. That is the vibe. That is the vibe. And it just kind of builds in and on itself, and it just becomes this convoluted mesh of anxiety. This convoluted mesh of anxiety and nightmare fuel. It's so good. So we have an unreliable narrator trapped in his own mind. So really, I want to leave you with this. Reading this feels like being trapped in a hall of funhouse mirrors and desperately needing to find the way out. If you enjoy haunting writing, if you enjoy novellas with, you know, interesting, like non-linear architecture, like this novella does not follow a standard plot. And if you're okay with being trapped in the mind of a raging misogynist, that is something that I do want to say. The main narrator is a raging misogynist, but in a way that I think is very interesting to read and lends itself to some very interesting feminist analysis. I couldn't actually stop thinking about the book from that perspective, because there is woman as object, woman as mother figure, woman as lover, all these kinds of things are explored in this nightmarish context of things transforming and spilling into one another. And it was genuinely very interesting to read. Obviously, it's disturbing, but it was also genuinely very, very interesting, and I do highly recommend it. It's a classic for a reason, and I want to do a reread now. This was another book I got from the library. I did get a copy in English, though, but I need to get my own copy at some point, because it was, wow. Wow. I need to go read some essays about this book now. Maybe I'll finish filming this video first and then do that. What I felt from The Blind Owl was from what I wanted to feel while reading The Hole. In The Hole, we are trapped in the mind and body of a narrator who is bedbound. He's just woken up from a horrible car accident. And slowly as the novel progresses, we find out the context of the accident, who else was in the accident, who was currently caring for him, and his life situation. And as that's revealed, we get a lot of these like foreboding, dark vibes that, you know, something isn't quite right. And that's always fun. Who doesn't love that? I think I might be too stupid for this book. Like, it went over my head, I think. I found it anticlimactic. And it just didn't hit me with the level of dread that I was hoping for. I've seen a lot of people really, really like it. So I think this is a me problem. This just didn't, it just didn't work for me. There was just something about it that I was like, when I set it down, I was like, I don't get it. Someone tell me what I didn't get. I don't get it. I did end up just giving it 2 stars. Yeah, it's bleak, it's well written, but I genuinely think I need someone to explain it to me. And I don't usually feel that way about books. I don't enjoy feeling that way about books. It's always a difficult thing to admit. So yeah, this book just left me like unsatisfied. It just left me thinking like there was supposed to be something that I inferred from the book that just I didn't know what that something was. Like I got into cryptic crosswords recently, and this book felt like a cryptic crossword clue that I couldn't parse what it was. I'm like, do you want me to do an anagram with this? Do you want me to find synonyms? I don't know. I don't know how you want me to interpret you. So I literally don't know how to rate this book, and I also don't know who to recommend it to, because I thought that I would be the target audience, and I was not. I was not. So I recommend this if you like weird, creepy, for like dread-filled novellas, and if you're smarter than me. Basically, when it comes to plot interpretation, please, if you understood The Whole, can you explain it to me? Like actually explain it in the comments. It's good for my engagement, and I actually don't. Don't get it. This was followed by another flop. I have a soft spot for Brene Brown because I have a soft spot for ideas around vulnerability and pushing through shame, the importance of the difference between shame and guilt, all these kinds of themes. I find them very interesting. So I like Brene Brown conceptually. And I actually really liked the intro of The Gifts of Imperfection. I listened to her read an edition that was like a 10-year anniversary or something, and she had some really nice commentary in the intro that felt very like familiar Brene Brown vibes. I enjoyed it a lot. But then for the book itself of The Gifts of Imperfection, it felt very superficial. It felt very, very, very superficial. And I think she acknowledges this in the prologue, that the examples she gives are very like middle class, not real problem examples. So a lot of like low review, like people who reviewed it lowly on Goodreads said this, that like the audience that would resonate with these examples is very, very narrow. Because she relies only on her own anecdotes, it really becomes her downfall because we're kind of just missing stuff. Like, Brene Brown is a researcher who has interviewed plenty of people. Show us that. Show us the interview. Tell us some of the stories. Like, this would have been so much more compelling if it were actually written more like a research paper. I think that's the best way I can say, because it's just written right now like a feel-good. Yeah, right now the way it's written is like really like a little feel-good manual of here's how to fix your life, rather than like a research and evidence-based book, which it allegedly is. So it's like the ideas aren't bad in of themselves, but they don't kind of have any foundation to stand on. And it would have been so much more compelling, so much more interesting if she'd included a variety of anecdotes, a variety of stories from her research participants, if she actually included some findings, all that kind of stuff. So this was fluffy, wholesome, but Brene, I love that you encourage us all to love ourselves more. I really appreciate that. But this wasn't for me. This wasn't for me. I think I've outgrown this flavor of Brene Brown. And we end with a really good sci-fi book, The Dark Forest. It was so good. So this is the sequel to The Three-Body Problem. We have physics, we have philosophy, we have politics, we have mind games. We have so many mind games. And we also finally go into the future. So those are kind of my favorite bits ever. It took me a really long time to kind of get into it because these books are chonkers that you really sort of need to digest and get into. These are also not really character-driven books. The characters are really just like chess pieces that the author moves around to sort of drive the narrative. And because I'm not connecting with the characters as much, it's hard to sort of get into it. But once I'm into it, like once I hit the 40% mark of this book, I could not stop. Mostly because just I love some good nihilism. I love some good morally great choices. I love the sci-fi backdrop that the writer, like, oh. In my review, I wrote that I don't want to say too much about the plot because it really is worth watching it unravel, and it's so satisfying. It's such a treat. Like, if you've read the first book, you need to read this. Yes, the beginning's slow. Yes, we rehash the first book for a little while. Just power through because it is so worth it. Here are kind of like my two favorite bits of it. Like I mentioned, there is mind games. If you watched the first season of Casa de Papel or Money Heist on Netflix, remember how it was really fun to watch the professor have a contingency plan for everything? Like he had a plan and then they counterattacked and then he counterattacked and then they counterattacked. There's a lot of those kinds of machinations that are really satisfying in The Dark Forest. I'd say the like middle chunk of the book is a lot of that. But in the whole book, there's a lot of these like mind games, planning, making your enemy believe one thing when you're actually doing another, or when you're actually prepared for seven different ways for them to respond, and you're not going to lose, basically. And then the second half of the book, we finally go into the future. Because the first book was really just set in from the 60s until the present, while here we go like into 200 years into the future. And it's so fun. It's so fun. It's such like good predictions, and they're so interesting. And the technological progress is a big crux in the novel. Because the whole kind of point is that the alien species has halted our technological progress so that we can't fight back against the aliens. It's kind of the vibe. So the type of progress that is made, I think, is very interesting. And the ways in which society has changed is very interesting. And what I really appreciate about how Cixin writes is that it's not presented as positive or negative. It's really just presented comprehensively in a way that I find quite realistic. And it's so comprehensive that then like you can kind of make out your own mind over how you feel about these ways that society has evolved. What I'm trying to say is, if you've read the first book, run, don't walk. Run, don't walk. Go read The Dark Forest. I can't wait to read the third. Like, I've been digesting this one, and like soon I will be ready. Soon I will be ready for book number 3. It's going to be even chonkier, and I'm so excited. I'm so sad that it took me this long to pick up these books because they're amazing. That's it for June. July's coming soon. We're already halfway through July, so I really need to get back on schedule with these videos. Lovely chatting with you about books as always. I hope you have a wonderful day. Let me know if you've read any of these and if you have any opinions on them. I love hearing your opinions. And I hope you read a really, really great book soon. All right, bye.